The word parasite echoed in the crowded living room. It was my son's annual holiday party, and the voice belonged to my daughter-in-law, Jessica. She was pointing right at me. I was just sitting in the armchair by the fireplace, the one my late wife always called the best seat in the house. "For 6 months, he's been living here," she announced, her voice sharp. A brittle smile played on her lips as if she were telling a fantastic joke, contributing nothing, just feeding off our hard work. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Our friends, our family, people who'd known me for decades, all started looking at their drinks, the floor, anywhere but at me. My son, Mark, stood frozen near the kitchen doorway, his shoulders hunched. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My daughter-in-law's smile widened, triumphant. She thought she'd won, that she'd finally put me in my place. I just looked at her, held her gaze for a long moment, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. I took a sip of my water and said nothing. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the deed to this beautiful, 4-bedroom house she was so proud of was in a file in my briefcase upstairs, and my name, Frank Miller, was the only one on it. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever felt underestimated by your own family, stick with me to the end. And if this story hits home, hit subscribe now, because you're going to want to hear how this one ends. She had no idea who she was really talking to, or what sacrifices were made so she could stand in that living room and hurl insults. To understand how we got to this ugly moment, we have to go back. Not just 6 months, but 40 years. We have to go back to when my wife, Sarah, was still alive. Sarah and I were a team. We started with nothing but a shared dream and built our life from the ground up. Our first home was a tiny, rented apartment with peeling paint and pipes that rattled. I worked construction, long hours breaking my body under the sun, while she worked double shifts as a nurse at the county hospital. Every dollar we earned was a testament to our partnership. We saved, we planned, and after 5 long years, we finally bought our first small house. That was the home we brought our son, Mark, home to. Our life wasn't flashy, but it was ours. It was filled with the smell of Sarah's baking and the sound of Mark's laughter. Sarah was the heart of our home. She made everything feel safe. She taught Mark how to be kind. I taught him how to be strong, how to fix things. We thought we were giving him the best of both of us. When Mark brought Jessica home, we were hopeful. She was ambitious, a real go-getter, and she seemed to make our son happy. Sarah, with her generous heart, welcomed her right away. "She's got fire in her, Frank," she used to tell me. "That's good. It'll push Mark to be his best." I wasn't so sure. I saw a certain hardness in Jessica's eyes, something transactional in the way she looked at our son. She seemed to love the idea of Mark, a steady guy from a good family, more than the man himself. But Sarah was happy, Mark was happy, so I kept my doubts to myself. They got married in our backyard, under the big oak tree we'd planted as a sapling. It was a perfect day. A few years later, when they were ready to buy their own house, The market was brutal. Prices were soaring. Even with 2 incomes, all they could afford was a cramped condo. By then, Sarah and I had done well. We'd invested wisely and had a healthy nest egg. We talked it over one night. "They need a leg up, Frank," Sarah said, her hand covering mine. "I don't want them to struggle the way we did. I want them to have a real home. A place for our grandkids to run around." That was Sarah, always thinking a generation ahead. So, we came up with a plan. We would buy the house for them. A beautiful, spacious house in a new development. The kind of place Jessica had plastered all over her Pinterest boards. We sat them down and made the offer. "We want to do this for you," Sarah explained. "It's your home. Live in it, love it, make it your own. All you have to do is cover the property taxes and utilities. Think of it as an early inheritance." Jessica's eyes lit up. Mark was speechless, just hugging us over and over, saying, "Thank you, Mom, thank you, Dad," but I added one condition. It was my only insistence, the quiet voice of a cautious man. "Just one thing," I said, looking from Mark to Jessica. "The deed stays in our names. For now. It's just a formality, some legal protection. Down the road, when the time is right, we'll sign it over completely." Jessica's smile flickered for just a second. She saw it not as a gift, but as a transaction with strings attached. Mark, though, just nodded eagerly. "Of course, Dad, that makes sense. It's your money. We get it. He got it. She never did." To us, it was a gift of love with a safety net built by a father's prudence. Sarah and I paid in cash, no mortgage, no debt. The house was ours, free and clear, and we handed the keys to our son and his wife, believing we had secured their future. We never imagined that in that very house I'd be called a parasite. Life went on. Mark and Jessica settled into their beautiful home. They hosted parties, and Jessica loved playing the role of perfect hostess in her perfect house. "See, Frank?" Sarah would whisper to me during visits. It was the right thing to do. And then Sarah got sick. It started slowly, a cough that wouldn't quit, a deep-seated fatigue. Then came the tests, the somber-faced doctors, and the diagnosis that blew our world apart. For 6 months, I was her full-time caregiver. I held her hand through every treatment, slept in chairs by her hospital bed, and learned to manage her pain and her fear. The world outside just ceased to exist. Mark was there when he could be, torn between his job, his wife, and his dying mother. Jessica was less present. She'd visit for short, awkward periods, bringing flowers that felt more like an obligation than anything else. She'd stand in the corner of the hospital room, checking her phone, uncomfortable with the messiness of it all. When Sarah passed, the silence she left behind was deafening. I was a ghost rattling around our empty house. Every corner held a memory. It was unbearable. A few months later, Mark sat me down, his face etched with worry. "Dad, I hate you being here by yourself. The house is too big, too quiet. Jessica and I were talking. We have that spare bedroom downstairs. Why don't you come live with us? You shouldn't be alone." Part of me resisted. I'm a proud man, but the lonely, grieving part of me was desperate, for the comfort of family. "Are you sure?" I asked him. "Are you sure Jessica's okay with this? I don't want to be a burden." "Of course, Dad," he insisted. "It was her idea. She said it's the least we can do. We want you with us." So, I agreed. I sold the house Sarah and I had built our lives in. I put the money into long-term investments, keeping only my pension for day-to-day expenses. I packed my clothes, a few boxes of Sarah's things I couldn't part with, and the locked file cabinet containing all our important documents, including the deed. I moved into their downstairs bedroom, hoping to find a new way to live. The first month wasn't so bad. It almost felt like a family. Jessica would ask what I wanted for dinner, or if I needed anything from the store. We'd watch TV together. It was a fragile peace, but it was peace. I tried to be the perfect house guest. I stayed out of their way, kept my room spotless, and offered to help with yard work or fix a leaky faucet, anything to show my gratitude, to feel useful. But then, things started to shift. The air of tolerance began to curdle into resentment. It started with money. One night at dinner, Jessica was sighing dramatically over the electricity bill. "I just don't know how it gets so high," she said, looking pointedly in my direction. The message was loud and clear. My reading lamp and the TV in my room were the problem. "I'd be happy to contribute, Jessica," I said immediately. "Just tell me what's fair." "Oh, no, Frank, don't be silly," she said, waving it away. But the seed was planted. A week later, I walked in on Mark and Jessica having a hushed, tense conversation in the kitchen. They stopped the second I entered. That night, Mark knocked on my door, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Dad," he started, shifting his weight. "Jessica was just thinking, you know, with your pension and the money from the house sale, maybe you could chip in for groceries? Things are a little tight." I was stunned, but I hid it. "Of course, Mark, I should have offered. How much?" He named a figure. It wasn't small. I calculated it was about half their entire monthly grocery bill, far more than one extra person would consume. But I didn't argue. I wrote him a check right then and there to keep the peace. I thought it would help. It had the opposite effect. In Jessica's mind, my contribution wasn't a help, it was an admission that I was a financial burden. She started making little comments. "Is that a new shirt, Frank?" It wasn't a compliment, it was an inventory. Then came the battle for territory. The house started to feel smaller. I had a small collection of Sarah's favorite books on a shelf in the living room. One day, they were gone. I found them in a box in my closet. "Oh," Jessica said when I asked, her tone breezy. "I just needed to clear that shelf for some new decor. It was looking so cluttered. I figured you wouldn't mind keeping your things in your own space, my own space." My world was now my bedroom and bathroom. She started complaining I was always underfoot. If I was in the kitchen while she was cooking, she'd let out a huge sigh. I started eating my meals at odd times just to avoid her. I spent more and more time in my room, feeling like a tenant in a boarding house. The most painful part was Mark's silence. My son, the one I'd taught to stand up for what's right, just let it happen. He saw the daily slights, the thinly veiled insults. But he hated conflict, and he chose the path of least resistance, appeasing his wife. Sometimes he'd try to make up for it, knocking on my door to ask if I wanted to go for a drive. In the car, away from the house, he was almost his old self. But we never talked about what was really happening. He was too cowardly to bring it up, and I was too proud to beg my own son to defend me. The final straw came a month before the party. I'm a carpenter by trade, and I'd started refinishing an old rickety table in the garage. It was a small project, something to give my days purpose. One afternoon, I walked into the garage, and the table was gone. In its place was a brand new elliptical machine. Jessica came out a moment later in workout gear. "Oh, Frank, isn't it great?" I decided I needed a home gym. That dusty old table was just taking up so much room. I had the sanitation guys haul it away this morning. I just stared at her. I'd spent 20 hours on that table. She'd thrown it away. Thrown away my time, my work, without a word. "You threw it away?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Well, yes," she said, looking at me like I was a child. "It was junk, Frank. I didn't say another word." I turned, walked back to my room, and sat on the edge of the bed. It wasn't about the table. It was the utter lack of respect. In her eyes, I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle, an old piece of furniture to be discarded when it became inconvenient. That's when I knew this couldn't last. The annual holiday party was Jessica's Super Bowl. For weeks, she ordered catered food, bought new decorations, and planned every detail. My only instruction was to stay out of the way. That night, the house was packed. I found a seat in the armchair by the fire, trying to make myself small. I was talking quietly with an old neighbor when I heard Jessica holding court in the center of the room. Her voice carried, and of course, my father-in-law lives with us now, she was saying. "Oh, how wonderful of you to take him in," one of her friends gushed. Jessica let out a short, sharp laugh. "Wonderful? I suppose," she said. Then she turned and pointed right at me. "The truth is, it's been an adjustment. For 6 months, he's been living here, contributing nothing, just feeding off our hard work." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I call him our little parasite." The word hit me like a punch. Parasite. The room fell dead silent. Every eye was on me. I could feel their pity. I looked over at my son. Mark stood by the kitchen, frozen, his face pale. This was his moment to step forward and say, "That's enough, Jessica. He did nothing." He stared at the floor, his jaw tight. He let his wife humiliate his father in a room full of people, and he chose silence. He chose her. In that instant, any hope I had left just dissolved. The disappointment was so complete it went beyond anger and settled into a cold, hard clarity. Jessica, seeing our silence as a victory, gave a tight, vicious little smile. I met her gaze across the room. I gave her no anger, no hurt. I just held her eyes for a long moment, then gave a single, deliberate nod. I took a sip of my water and said nothing. I let her have her moment. I let them all think what they wanted. She had just declared war, not knowing her enemy owned the very ground she was standing on. The party sputtered out after that. People made their excuses and left, casting uncomfortable looks my way. I just sat in my chair, a statue of calm in the ruins of my family. I was no longer grieving. I was planning. If you're still with me and I have a feeling you are, drop a comment and tell me, would you have said something right there at the party, or waited like I did? I want to hear it. Now, here's where it turns. An hour later, I stood up and walked to my room. I didn't pack much. I filled an overnight bag with some clothes and toiletries. I pulled out the small fireproof briefcase, clicked it open, and ran my fingers over the crisp paper in the folder labeled House. The deed. My name, Frank Miller, and Sarah's name, Sarah Miller. Sole owners. Paid in full. I locked the briefcase, put on my coat, and walked out. Mark and Jessica were cleaning up. I walked straight to the front door. "Where are you going, Dad?" Mark asked, his voice strained. I paused, my hand on the knob, but didn't turn around. "Out," I said, my voice flat. I stepped into the cold night and closed the door behind me. Not a slam, just a quiet, final click. I put the briefcase on the passenger seat and drove away. The Parasite was gone. I checked into a hotel a few towns over. The silence in the clean, anonymous room wasn't lonely. It was empowering. It was the silence of a man taking back control. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt a profound sadness for my son and a cold, determined resolve. It was time to correct Jessica's misunderstanding. I slept soundly for the first time in months. The next day, I let them wonder. My phone finally rang in the afternoon. "Mark," I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. On the fourth try, I answered. "Dad, where are you? Are you okay?" He sounded frantic. "I'm fine, Mark. When are you coming back?" "We were worried." "Were you?" I asked. "Were you worried last night when your wife called me a parasite in front of 30 people?" The long, familiar silence of his cowardice. "Dad, she didn't mean it like that. She gets carried away." "No, Mark," I said, my voice like steel. "She meant it exactly like that. And you stood there and let her. We have nothing more to discuss on the phone." "What do you mean?" "Dad, please just come home so we can talk." "I will come home," I said, "but not to talk. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon at 2:00. You and Jessica will both be there. We're going to have a meeting." "A meeting? What are you talking about?" 2:00, Mark. I hung up. The next morning I called a property lawyer. She confirmed my position was unassailable. At 1:45 p.m. the next day, I checked out of the hotel. I drove to the house, their house, my house, and sat in the driveway for a moment. I took a deep breath, picked up my briefcase, and walked to the front door. I didn't use my key. I rang the bell. Mark opened the door, looking haggard. Jessica stood behind him, arms crossed, trying to look defiant, but her eyes were flickering with anxiety. I walked past them to the dining room table, placed my briefcase on it, and took the seat at the head of the table. "Sit down," I said. It was not a request. They exchanged a nervous glance and sat. I let the silence stretch, letting them stew in it. Finally, Jessica couldn't take it. "Frank, this is ridiculous. If this is about that stupid joke, it is not about a joke." I cut in, my voice low. "A joke is funny. What you did was cruel. But even that is just a symptom." I looked at Mark. "I have tried to be invisible in this house. I have contributed financially. I have watched as I was made to feel like an intruder, and through it all, you said nothing." He shrank in his chair. "Dad, I know. The time for you to speak was 2 nights ago." I turned my full attention to Jessica. "You're very proud of this house, aren't you? You enjoy telling people it's yours." "It is ours," she snapped. "Is it?" I clicked open the latches on my briefcase. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I pulled out the manila folder and slid it across the table. "Open it." With trembling fingers, she pulled out the documents, the purchase agreement, and then the official county deed. I watched her face drain of all color as she read it. Confusion, then comprehension, then stark disbelief. "What is this?" she whispered. "That," I said calmly, "is the deed to this house. I suggest you read the names listed under owner." Mark leaned over her shoulder, his face ashen. "Oh my God," he breathed. "It's not possible," Jessica stammered. "It's no mistake," I said. "My late wife's name and my name are the only names on it. We bought this house. We paid for it, in full. You are not homeowners. You are tenants who have been living here rent-free for 5 years by my good graces." She stared at me, eyes wide with horror. "You called me a parasite, Jessica," I continued, each word a hammer blow. "A parasite lives on a host and benefits at the host's expense. You have been living in my house, benefiting from my generosity, while treating me with contempt. So I ask you, who is the parasite?" She had no answer. Mark finally found his voice. "Dad, I didn't know. I thought you assumed," I said, the disappointment thick in my voice. "Because it was easier. I let the brutal truth settle over them." "So," I said, leaning back, "now that we all understand the facts, we're going to discuss the new terms of your residency." Jessica finally broke, tears streaming down her face. "Are you kicking us out?" I looked at her, then at my son. For all his weakness, he was still my boy. I hadn't come for revenge. I'd come for respect. "No," I said slowly. "I am not kicking you out." A wave of relief washed over Mark's face. "But things are going to change," I continued. "Effective the 1st of next month, you will begin paying rent. Fair market value. We will draw up a formal lease. Secondly, this is my house. I will use any room I wish, at any time. My books will go back on the bookshelf. I am no longer a guest. I am the owner." I paused. "And third, I will be treated with respect. No more sighs, no more comments, no more insults. If at any point I feel you are not holding up your end of the bargain, I will give you 30 days written notice to vacate. Is that clear?" Jessica could only nod, utterly broken. I looked at Mark. And you will find your spine. If you ever again stand by in silence while I am disrespected in my own house, you will not just lose a father under your roof, you will lose the roof itself. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Mark said quietly, unable to meet my eyes. It was the first time he'd called me sir since he was a boy standing at his mother's funeral, looking for someone to tell him what to do next. I closed the folder, latched the briefcase, and stood up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, the way you feel after finishing a long job done right. Sarah would have hated the shouting, but she would have loved the quiet of that room when it was over no raised voices, just the truth, laid flat on a table like a level line on a wall I'd built myself. Rent checks started coming in on the 1st of the month, right on time, ever since. My books went back on the shelf. Nobody sighs when I'm in the kitchen anymore. It isn't the family I dreamed of when Sarah and I planted that oak tree in the backyard all those years ago. But it's honest now. And honest, I've learned, is worth more than comfortable. Jessica still calls this our house to her friends. I let her. Words are cheap. Deeds the real kind, on paper, with your name on them, are the only thing that's ever held up in this family when it mattered. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. There are a lot more like it coming. And if you've ever had to remind your own family who really built the roof over their heads, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every one.